has been reported that Maduro offered everything in his country, all the natural resources. He even recorded a message to you in English recently, offering mediation. What should we do in order to stop that?
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to fuck around with the United States. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys. Let's go. Start moving.
Let's start here. If you were to ask some people, historians, lawyers, diplomats, what is not supposed to happen in the modern world, one answer will come up again and again. A sitting president being captured by another country. Not sanctioned, not condemned, not isolated, captured. That word alone breaks expectations because it challenges the idea that the global system still runs on rules instead of power. And yet, here we are. So before we talk about whether this was justified, before we talk about legality, before we talk about morality, we have to answer a simpler, more dangerous question. How did the world arrive at a point where this was even possible? For most of the 20th century, the relationship between the United States and Venezuela was not dramatic. It was not ideological. It was not emotional. It was not confrontational. It was transactional. Venezuela possessed enormous oil reserves. The United States needed energy stability. That relationship produced predictability. The US did not aggressively interfere in Venezuela's internal politics. Venezuela remained economically integrated into the Western system. There were disagreements, but not hostility. And that matters because it tells us something very important. This conflict was not inevitable. Everything changed in 1999. That was the year when Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela. Chavez did not quietly assume power. He did not reassure Western institutions. He did not maintain diplomatic ambiguity. He openly rejected US influence. He framed Venezuela as a nation that has been exploited. He positioned sovereignty as resistance. He described American power as imperialism. This was not just a speech, this was policy. Oil policy was restructured. Military cooperation with the United States declined. Foreign alliances shifted away from Washington. From the US perspective, Chavez was destabilizing. From Venezuela's perspective, Chavez was reclaiming control. Both sides believed they were reacting defensively. That misunderstanding would never be resolved. In April 2002, Hugo Chavez was briefly removed from power during a coup attempt. Within days, he returned. The Venezuelan government accused the United States of supporting the coup. The United States denied direct involvement. But the long-term effect had nothing to do with proof. It had nothing to do with belief. From that movement forward, Venezuela's leadership operated under one assumption: the United States was willing to remove them. Once that belief takes hold, trust does not recover. Every protest becomes suspicious. Every criticism feels coordinated. Every sanction feels preparatory. This is how paranoia becomes policy. From 2002 onward, the relationship hardened. Venezuela moved closer to non-US allies. The United States became increasingly critical of Venezuela's governance. When Hugo Chavez died in 2013, Nicolás Maduro inherited not just power, but unresolved conflict. The economy was already fragile. Political polarization was already extreme. International trust was already broken. Maduro did not create this environment, but he governed inside of it. Under Maduro, protests intensified. The government responded with force. The United States accused Venezuela of human rights abuses. Venezuela accused the United States of economic sabotage. Two narratives form. In one narrative, Maduro was an authoritarian clinging to power. In the other, Maduro was resisting foreign destabilization. These narratives did not compete. They hardened separately. And then the United States formalized pressure. This is where it gets deeper. In 2015, the United States issued an executive order declaring Venezuela a national security concern. This was not symbolic. It created legal authority for sanctions. Sanctions that restricted banking access, froze assets, and pressured international partners, and reduced economic oxygen. From the United States' perspective, this was accountability. From Venezuela's perspective, this was economic warfare. Regardless of interpretation, the result was clear. Economic suffering deepened, political positions hardened, and diplomatic solutions narrowed. January 2019 marked a decisive shift. The United States declared that Juan Guaido, not Nicolás Maduro, was the legitimate president of Venezuela. This was not rhetoric, this was legal repositioning. From that moment, Maduro was no longer recognized as the head of state by the US. His authority was rejected and his protections were weakened. This decision matters more than any sanction because legitimacy is the foundation of sovereignty. Once legitimacy is removed, everything else becomes negotiable. In March 2020, the US Department of Justice unsealed indictments. They accused Nicolás Maduro and others of narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, weapons offenses, and coordination with armed groups. This was unprecedented. A sitting president was no longer just isolated, he was criminally charged. The United States placed a monetary reward on information leading to his arrest. That reward eventually reached $50 million. From this point forward, the US position was clear. Maduro was not a leader, he was a fugitive. This is where the critics entered the record. Legal scholars argue that the heads of state possesses sovereign immunity, and indictments do not override sovereignty, and military captive violates international norms. And also, no United Nations authorization was granted, and no declaration of war was issued. Their concern was not the defense of Maduro, their concern was precedent. If one nation can seize another nation's leader under criminal framing, the global system changes. This is a warning. The United States rejected that framing. Its position was simple. They said, we do not recognize Maduro as president, sovereign immunity does not apply, criminal conspiracies are prosecutable, and that this was a law enforcement operation. In other words, you cannot claim protection from a title we do not acknowledge. This logic reframes the act entirely. Now, whether the world accepts that logic is still unresolved. On January 3rd, 2026, US forces captured Nicolás Maduro and transferred him to US custody. There was no ambiguity. This was not symbolic. This was not rhetoric. This was execution of a long-standing position. To many, it felt sudden, but it was not. It felt sudden because the public saw the endpoint without the pathway. Years of sanctions, delegitimization, indictments, rewards, and diplomatic breakdown were compressed into a single headline. History rarely announces itself clearly. It accumulates quietly. This moment forces an uncomfortable question. Where does law end and power begin?
I think we have to really ask ourselves what is truly the motivation behind why the US is invading Venezuela, because frankly, that has been muddled.
Raquel Aldana, an expert in immigration law, says the strikes come after months of building tension in the region, with President Trump promoting the ouster as a way to stem the flow of drugs into the U.S.
It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolás Maduro to justice,
while also giving the U.S. a greater stake in the country and control of its oil.
We're going to take back the oil that, frankly, we should have taken back a long time ago. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
Either of those two examples, even if we take them at face value, are not valid reasons to invade a country.
This story topping international headlines tonight, from Cuba to Miami to here in Atlanta, even the nation's capital. Demonstrators are rallying across the Americas in response to this attack. Some are celebrating the capture of President Maduro, while others are protesting, chanting "No war on Venezuela."
This is a government making a decision that could plunge an entire region into war without any sort of approval from Congress. There's no representation occurring on our government right now.
So what I want to see happen is the end of the sanctions regime against Venezuela. No more bombing campaigns. The president needs to be returned immediately because, again, it's sick and sadistic to steal the president of another country.
Mayor Karen Bass saying in a statement, quote, "The administration's reckless decision to strike Venezuela to remove Nicolás Maduro risks chaos, violence, and entrenching the United States in a conflict the American people did not ask for. Los Angeles will continue to stand for peace, democracy, and diplomacy."
My main worry is that we're going to be sucked into another prolonged 20-year war with no real end in sight.
We saw it in Iraq in 2003 with a takeover of a country that was no threat to us in the name of a resource, namely oil.
I want to show you all the people protesting here in the middle of the street on West Colfax Avenue. This group started out outside the Capitol. Now they're kind of moving down the street. You can see some of their signs say "No war on Venezuela."
Many of these people protesting say the U.S. capture of Nicolás Maduro will lead to escalation in the region.
And while Maduro really is not a good guy, he's a terrible dictator, I don't think that Trump is going to help their people. I don't think that's his intent here.
And reactions from Venezuelans are mixed. Some celebrating in the streets in places like Miami.
I can't tell you how happy I am. There's tears in my eyes. We've been waiting for this moment since 1998.
While others, like Omelis Marchan, a Venezuelan living in Denver, say celebrating this moment is ignorant. She came to the U.S. with her family in 2023 to escape crime in Venezuela.
¿Qué vamos a celebrar?
They're celebrating what exactly? The fall of people in Venezuela, the deaths that have happened.
Her father, uncles, and her husband live in Caracas. She says her family is living in a state of fear, not sure what will happen tomorrow, and not sure what President Trump is planning for Venezuelans.
There's a lot of people who are saying, yes, we need someone to intervene, but they don't know what an intervention is. They don't understand that what they're seeing in the poverty right now in Venezuela is only going to lead to more poverty after this and more need in the country.
Some will say justice was served. Some would say sovereignty was violated. Some would say order was enforced. Some would say chaos was invited. All of those views exist because history allows them to. But this event does not end with custody. It continues in international courts, diplomatic realignment, economic consequence, and global precedent. Other nations are watching, not because they support Maduro, but because they're measuring risk. History would not judge this moment emotionally. It would judge it by what precedent was set, what power was normalized, what protections were weakened, and what comes next. So this is not a conclusion. This is a checkpoint. And now you understand how we got here. I'm Dane Calloway, and I'm just here to make you think. I'm just here to make you think.
Slow down. Yeah. Sub up, light up.